Hi everyone and welcome to Wine Unpacked, the speedy version. These are short and sweet lessons to give you a quick summary and some tasting notes for each wine, but not as much detail as the main lesson. If you're looking for a relaxing evening, maybe not for you, but if you're in a hurry, they'll give you the gist of what's in your pack in around 20 minutes. Don't try to keep up with each drink as we go through. It might be a struggle to drink that much wine so quickly. You can either watch the video now and then enjoy each wine at your own leisurely pace, or perhaps just pause when you get to the end of each section. This month we're looking at blends and exploring some of the common red blends you'll find around the world. As you probably guessed, blends are what happen when a winemaker mixes two or more wines together to achieve a particular outcome. The outcome they're looking for could be a really high quality wine, no expenses spared, or it might be trying to produce a large volume of drinkable but not incredible wine, or something in between. They could be looking to produce a similar wine from year to year, and because nature often throws grape growers some curveballs in the field, they need to use blending to smooth out any irregularities. Blending gives winemakers more control and allows them to dial certain characteristics up or down to get where they want to go. Blending can increase complexity. Blends rely on having different grapes to start with, either from different varieties, or they could be from the same variety but different fields, or also grapes from the same field that have gone through different production techniques in the winery, or even a mix of all of the above. Blending normally happens once the different batches of wine have finished fermenting or after they finish maturing, but before they're put into bottles to be sold. So let's dive in and find out about some of these blends. We mentioned that some blends are made from individual grape varieties, and that's the case with the first wine. It's a single varietal wine, 100% Shiraz from the Barossa Valley in Australia, from Peter Lehmann. It's called Shiraz here in Australia and also in other warm climate regions, but the Shiraz grape is actually the exact same grape as Syrah. Generally in cooler climates it's given a name Syrah, and in warmer climates it's known as Shiraz. Our winemaker here has named this one Hill and Valley, and that's because despite being made from one type of grape, it's actually made from two different sites. The Hill site is higher up and will be cooler, but sunnier, with good drainage and poor quality soil, a good thing for grapes. The Valley site is likely to be warmer and produce more grapes, but of a lower quality. By mixing these two different sites together, the winemaker is sacrificing some quality from the premium Hill site while upgrading the potential of those from the Valley. So let's check it out. Colour-wise, deep purple. The colour intensity are typical of the Syrah grape. We've got a really intense wine. The aromas really jump out of the glass and there's a good complexity. First up, some black fruit, there's blueberry jam, black currant, ripe black plum, and some black cherry. There's also a couple of unusual aromas in here as well. A bit of olive, black pepper, maybe some licorice, all pretty common with Shiraz and Syrah wines. Lastly, I'm getting spices and aromas from the oak, some baking spice, clove, a touch of vanilla, and some coconut too. The wine is matured in oak with 25% new oak barrels. Some of the wine is put into the new barrels and some into the old. Once it's matured, the winemaker can play around with the proportions until they're happy with the result. Another blend of different production methods. The wine doesn't have any age on it, so let's skip that part and take a sip. I'm really getting that black fruit coming through and the coconut and the spices too. I'd say we're looking at full-bodied with medium to high tannins and medium acidity. Shiraz wines can be quite tannic, but in warmer climates, these are often a little softer. This one has a full body from all the rich, ripe fruit, but in warm climates, acidity often drops too. Conclusions-wise, we're looking at a wine that scores well on intensity, complexity, and balance, but could maybe have a touch more acidity too, and a slightly longer finish. Nonetheless, a really good wine at a decent price point for around £13 to £14. So if I was looking for something to pair this with, food-wise I'd say maybe something heavily spiced, but not spicy. Some lamb shawarma or Adana kofta could work really nicely. So that's wine number one, an Australian Shiraz. If you like the Barossa Valley, this has got plenty of great Shiraz, and if you fancy something a bit more European from a cooler climate, check out Northern Rhone Shiraz. Wines from this cooler climate will be more peppery, more tannic, and with a less ripe, rich fruit flavour. Moving on to wine number 2, and this one goes by a couple of different names as well. In Spanish-speaking countries, it's known as Garnacha, whereas in France, it's known as Grenache. We're heading down to Spain now, so let's call it Garnacha. More specifically, we are going to Navarra, a region in the shadow of the Pyrenees. And the northerly latitude and the altitude from the foothills gives it a little bit of a cooler climate. Not cold, but nothing like sunny Australia. So, let's see what we've got going on here. With this wine, we're looking at a very different colour. I'd say ruby rather than purple. And it's definitely paler in colour, probably medium. Intensity? Been dialed down a little bit. It's not bad, but it's not as powerful as the previous wine. Perhaps we're at the upper end of medium. So aroma-wise, what can you pick out? This one's much fresher to me. I'd say we're looking at like fresh red fruit rather than jammy black fruit. I get some strawberry, raspberry and red cherry, maybe a bit of cranberry too. It's definitely a much fresher wine. There's nothing too complex going on outside of this, but I do get a bit of something herbal, maybe a little bit of thyme. Because this wine isn't aged, and because we've gone natural Grenache, they tend to limit the use of oak. We shouldn't be getting any secondary or tertiary aromas here. Let's take a sip. Again, I can really feel that freshness coming through into the wine. The flavours of the red fruit are all there, and it's a bit more lifted and less dense than the last one. It's still got a pretty full body despite this freshness. Garnacha as a grape can make very alcoholic wines, and that adds to the body. Tannins are fairly low on this one, and acidity is looking medium to high. Normally, Garnacha wines aren't too acidic, but because of a slightly cooler climate here, it's actually got a bit more than usual. Conclusions-wise, I think it's not quite as intense or complex, but still decent, and on top of that, it does have a really great balance too. I find the finish lingers a little bit longer than the last one before fading away. Because you can serve Garnacha wine slightly chilled, we could go for one of the chilled Spanish soups, maybe gazpacho. But Grenache could handle heftier meat dishes, and it goes well with tomato sauces too, so maybe a nice beef stew. What did you think of this wine? Are you more of a fan of the deep black fruit heavy Shiraz or the lighter, fresher, red fruit focused Garnacha? If you can't decide, you'll be pleased with what's coming next. So let's pour wine number 3 out and see what's in store. With wine number 3, as you might have already guessed, we're going to look at a wine made from a blend of different grape varieties. What better blend of grapes to look at than the two we've just tried on their own? Rather than Shiraz and Garnacha though, we're looking at their French monikers, Syrah and Grenache. These two grapes are often blended together all over the world, but it all started in the Rhone Valley in France. The Rhone Valley is split into 2 parts. In the north, where the valley is tight and steep, the only black grape they're permitted to use in their red wines is Syrah. But down in southern Rhone, where the valley opens out, you'll find a whole bunch of different grapes. Whether you're looking at the more generic Côte de Rhône wines or the slightly more upmarket ones, the Côte de Rhône Village wines, and even the prestigious named appellations such as Châteauneuf-du-Pape, all of them are permitted to use a variety of grapes and create blended wines, and most of them do. Some of these wines contain up to 20 different grapes. The 3 most common ones are Syrah and Grenache, along with Mourvedre, which is known as the Rhône blend. We're headed to a region called Gigondas, one of the more prestigious regions in the southern Rhône. Châteauneuf-du-Pape is always considered the most premium of these, and it is one of the most premium wines in the world. But just because it has the name on the bottle doesn't mean it's always good. You can often get much better value from the slightly less well-known Gigondas and Vacqueyras. Let's check out this Gigondas from Domaine Grapillon d'Or. Here we have a blend of 80% Grenache and 20% Syrah. Colour-wise, we are headed back towards ruby again, and probably a medium colour intensity. It's definitely got power. I'd say strong intensity here. Picking out some of the aromas, I think up front you're getting the black fruit from the Syrah, blackcurrant, blueberry and the like. But because we're in a cooler climate, they're not quite as jammy as the Australian Shiraz. I'm picking up some pepper, a little bit of licorice, and also some kind of oak influence in the form of a little gentle baking spice, a bit of clove and smoke. All these aromas subside and there's that fresh red fruit underneath that comes through from the Grenache. While this wine doesn't have a ton of age on it, I'm getting a little bit of leather and definitely some truffle aroma too. I think body-wise, we're definitely going to go full again. The high alcohol content of the Grenache coupled with the thick-skinned Syrah are giving the wine a really luxurious texture. And the oak is helping with that a bit too. Tannin again, we're medium to high. The cooler region makes the tannins a bit more noticeable, but the lower tannin Grenache in the blend brings it down a bit. Acidity-wise, I think we're medium, but let's move on to conclusions. Intensity, complexity, and balance, we're looking pretty good. The Syrah and the Grenache are both contributing different qualities here to make a great blended wine. I think the Syrah comes up front and carries it through to the middle, and then the red fruit flavours kick in halfway and lift the wine up. Food-wise, this region is famous for its truffles, and the wine has a bit of that coming through. So anything rich with truffles would work, but also the famous Puy lentils are from the next valley over, so could do a classic French saucisse or lentille. It's a really great wine, but what do you think? And can you pick out those different characteristics? If you're a fan of the blend, then check out any Southern Rhone. There's a whole world of wines to explore from here for really reasonable prices to the ultra premium. Let's hop on to wine number 4 and check out some more interesting blending techniques. With wine 4, we're headed to Fair Verona in northern Italy, next to Lake Garda. The area we're looking at specifically is called Valpolicella, and they make a couple of pretty funky wines here. First, there's a regular Valpolicella and Valpolicella Superiore. Both of these wines are fairly light, acidic, and fruity. At the other end of the spectrum, we have some pretty unusual, interesting red wines made from grapes that are picked and then dried on racks to concentrate the sugars before they're crushed and fermented to make the wine. One of these wines is always sweet. That's called Valpolicella Recioto. And one of them can be off-dry or dry, and that's called Valpolicella Amarone. In the middle, we have another interesting wine. It's called Valpolicella Ripasso, and that's what you've got in your glasses now. And this one is from Corte Chiara. It's a blend of the different ends of a Valpolicella spectrum, made by adding the grapes from a fermenting Amarone and putting them into a regular Valpolicella wine. Let's see what that does. Colour, we're looking at a medium ruby with this one, and a lot of interesting aromas are happening. I get really powerful cherry aromas. Cherry drops, glacé cherries, even cherry cola. Maybe a bit of black fruit, some blackcurrant and blackcurrant leaf, and also a slightly bitter herb as well. Getting some more unusual orange peel, cinnamon, and some baking spices. A bit of an odd combo of aroma. It's a little bit like mulled wine. It's interesting to taste too. It's got that really unique set of flavours with the cherry alongside the spice and the fruit peel. Structure-wise, we're looking at a medium to high body despite the lighter colour. Tannins are medium to high due to the fermentation of the skins, giving it 2 chances to extract tannins. Acidity is high, and this is coming from the grape varieties they use in the blend. The Corvina gives the acidity and fruit flavour, and Rondinella brings that herbal note and helps flesh out the body. What do you reckon? It's definitely complex and intense, the finish is good, and it's technically well balanced. A really good wine by all accounts, although it might not be for everyone. A great food pairing for this wine would be a dish called risotto all'amarone, made from the Amarone wine where the fermenting grape mash comes from to make this Ripasso wine. It's a simple risotto with rice, stock, the Amarone wine, and loads of local cheese. But any rich meaty stew would do. Perhaps a lamb tagine. We're now moving back to something a bit more conventional. Hopping back to Spain, so when you're done with wine number 4, let's pop 5 into our glasses. This one you've probably heard of before. Red wine fans will almost definitely have drunk one. It's called Rioja, and it's mega popular in the UK. Rioja is the name of a region in northern Spain where this wine is made, and it's not far from where wine number 2 came from. It's the region just next door. Rioja wines are typically blended, with Tempranillo being the main grape used. Garnacha is often used too, but not here. We've got a mix of Tempranillo, Graziano, and Mazuelo. Looks-wise, I'd say we're somewhere between medium and deep, ruby with a touch of purple. Intensity is quite in your face, and there's quite a bit going on. A strong intensity wine. What can you make out? You get a small amount of black fruit up front, some blackberry and some black cherry, but it's not a mega fruity aroma that's most obvious. This wine is a Rioja Reserva, and that word printed on the bottle actually indicates a couple of things. The first is that the wine has been aged for 3 years minimum, and the second is that it's spent at least half of that time in oak. There are few different categories of Rioja. Those labelled Joven or Genericos don't have any aging or oak aging requirements. But at the other end, Grand Reservas must be at least 5 years old with 18 months spent in oak. This is a Reserva wine. It's just a step down from Grand Reserva. Because of the age, the fruit flavour moves away from fresh primary fruit and into dried tertiary fruit. We've got some fig, some prunes, and also some other aged aromas of leather and mushroom. But the oak is also giving it some really strong coconut and vanilla flavours. Rioja uses lots of American oak, and this gives the wine a much stronger, sweeter aroma than French oak. Flavour-wise, I'm getting some really intense, interesting flavours coming through. That oak and age is giving the wine a real complexity. Hopefully you can pick some of that out. Body-wise, it's definitely full. The Tempranillo grape in this warm climate gives grapes a really nice texture, and the oak influence adds to that. With tannins, we've got medium to high, but they're not astringent in any way. Age helps to soften them, as does the time that wine spends in oak. Acidity, we're good again. The Mazuelo in the blend adds to this, and Tempranillo is quite acidic too. Drawing our conclusions, I'd say this is great. It scores well on all 4 criteria, and for the price, it's even better. You'd pay about £20 in a shop for this, or maybe 35 quid in a restaurant. Rioja is a great choice with foods because of the acidity, the complexity and big flavours, matched with a relatively low price point for a lot of the wines. There are tons of great options, but this one is from Ramon Bilbao, a relatively large-scale producer. If you're looking for something to pair with a rich and hearty meat dish, look no further. I'd pair it with slow-braised ox cheeks. Moving along again, and we're ready for our last wine. We're sticking on the Iberian Peninsula, but heading over to Portugal. So pour out wine number 6 and let's check it out. Portugal is an old winemaking country, but is most famous in the UK for producing ports, especially in the Douro region where we're headed today. Port wines are high tannin, high alcohol, big flavour, sweet fortified wines. They're made by taking grapes and fermenting them for a really short time while trying to get as much flavour as possible out of them. When the time is right, they add spirit alcohol to kill the yeast while there's still lots of sugar in the wine, which gives port its unique sweet and high alcohol characteristics. Because fermentation is so short, they need to get as much colour and flavour out as possible, so they use a blend of grapes with thick skins and lots of flavour. But they also turn these same grapes into regular red wine. And when they're fermented all the way to the end, they give us some really powerful dry red wines that are becoming more and more popular in the UK. And that's what we've got here. Looks like we've got a lot of colour, somewhere between deep purple and ruby. Interestingly, not too overpowering on the nose, but still a medium intensity, I think. Give it a swirl and let's see what we can find. I get some black fruit up front, plum, blackberry and some cherry. Also quite a bit of red fruit. Some red cherry that a few of the other wines I've had today, and some sharp red plum and also maybe a bit of pomegranate. The different blend of the grapes is giving the wine this mix of red and black fruit flavours. The first grape is actually Tempranillo, but under a Portuguese pseudonym, Tinta Roriz, and that's where the black cherry is coming from. Touriga Nacional is giving the sharp plum, and a Touriga Franca is lifting it with a fresh red fruit and some pomegranate. I'm not getting tons from the other wheels, but maybe a very faint touch of smoke and spice. Okay, so the wine is actually way more intense on the palate than the nose. And hopefully you can pick out the different layers of flavour. I get the dark fruit followed by the slightly fresher red fruit. It's definitely really full-bodied, with 2 of the grapes used contributing to this, as well as the high alcohol levels helping out. Tannins are massive here for me. The thick skins are giving it that slight astringency and they're getting stuck in my teeth. Definitely a wine to have with food. Acidity-wise, I'd probably go with medium to high. This wine is good, but maybe could do with a bit more complexity and a slightly longer finish. It's also quite heavy on the tannins for me, but good value at £15. If you're looking for a food pairing, I'd suggest an audacious Portuguese sandwich called a francesinha, which is a steak and sausage sandwich covered with melted cheese and a port wine sauce. You could also go for a big, flavourful pasta, perhaps spaghetti puttanesca or something similar. So, what do you reckon about the whistle-stop tour of our 6 wines? First, single variety Shiraz followed by a single variety Garnacha wine to show off the characteristics of both of those. Then we moved on to a Syrah Grenache blend to show you what happens when you mix the 2 together with the Rhone blend from the appellation of Gigondas. Next, we had the Valpolicella Ripasso, a bit of an odd one, the Rioja Reserva, a bit of an old and oaky one, and then finally the Portuguese Douro wine, a very big tannin-heavy wine to finish things off. Did you prefer the classic Rhone blend, or were some of the slightly more unusual mixes up your street? There are so many blends out there, it's impossible to run through them all in a single lesson. But we cover a few of them elsewhere in the course. And if you see a blend of grapes you've not heard of before, give it a try and see what each of them is bringing to the table. As always, we love to hear your feedback, and please tag us in any photos on your social media. Thanks for swinging by, and we'll see you next month for more wine and more fun.